While a majority of your personality does get formed in your teenage years, it can still feel like you are lost and struggling and don't quite know who you are in your 20s. Now, why is that? That's exactly the question that we're going to dive into in this week of the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. Because if we're solidifying our sense of self that was formed in our teenage years, why does it get so hard? Why isn't it easier to do? Keeping everything simple, let's dive right in. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow student, Michael Klukas, and on this show, we boil down complicated topics into simple and actionable tips. Now, the first hurdle that we got to get over is what I'm going to call the first identity crisis. It's like 10 years old to 19-year-old, because this is the first time in which you are really solidifying who you think you are and who you think you want to be. So the first part of that is a majority of your identity is formed during adolescence. So the value sets that you hold, the biases that unfortunately become ingrained at times, and just the thoughts about who you are and your place in the world, a lot of that is formed when you are a kid, when you are growing up and having all these formative experiences and having all these formative relationships. And so as we approach this first identity crisis, it's because now we have so many competing ideas thrown at us while still having the general idea or the general fallback that, hey, your family or your immediate circle is going to help form a lot of the identity that you're growing up with. And that brings us then to the second hurdle of like the first identity crisis is it's confusing because this is a phase of discovery. It's a phase of, let me try this. Like we all remember, if like you're an older Gen Z like me, you remember the scene kids. You remember the kids that had the Cookie Monster hat or the Neff brand everywhere, the start of Supreme and that being a thing. And then you have the kids that turn from, one subgroup if they were like a nerd and unpopular and they suddenly became ripped over the summer, or they got really in shape and joined one of the popular sports teams. So many different things can be a source of discovery for us, especially again during adolescence, because you are trying to form this understanding of what your place in the world is, who you want to be in the world, and what you want your impact to be. And of course, we all regret some choices we made during these times, because there's very few people that don't have like some middle school, high school photos that they just wish would either be burned or deleted forever off the internet. And that's part of growing up, and that's part of the identity forming experience, because as you come away from these series of regrets, they also become a source of learning for you. They become a source of understanding of, okay, maybe that haircut wasn't it. Maybe that sense of style didn't really fit who I wanted to be. It was just a way of expressing myself, and I no longer need to do that, nor do I want to do that. And it's important to know that even if we all have regrets from this first identity crisis, that is completely natural and is not something to, feel bad about, but is instead something to feel thankful for and grateful for, because you are now closer to an ideal sense of self, because you've gone through some quote unquote hardships, whatever they might be, and have emerged on the other side of it. And real quick, thank you guys so much for watching. And if you are finding any value on this, if you watch this on YouTube, make sure you leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you know every time that we upload a new episode. It really does help us out so much, and I greatly appreciate it. If you're listening to us on Spotify or a podcast app, then make sure you leave us a 5-star rating and give us a follow. That way again, every time I upload a new episode. And it just stokes my ego just a little bit more. But with that, let's jump right back into the podcast. Now, the second hurdle here that we're going to really dive into is the quarter life crisis, 20 to 30 years old. I'm categorizing it as 20 to 30 because the quarter life crisis is a bit more popularized now, where we've all heard about like the midlife crisis, where your parent who's gray and suddenly starts dyeing their hair. Maybe they get a new girlfriend or they get a new boyfriend and they buy a fancy car or a motorcycle or a jet ski, and they suddenly start acting like they're in their 20s again, even though they're in their 40s, 50s. And that's the pretty common one you recognize on, TV and whatnot. Is for years the idea of like the midlife crisis, but now the quarter life crisis is a lot more prevalent because as you are going through your 20s and 30s, the formative adult years, you have three kind of buckets you fall into: the falling behind, the getting ahead, or right in the middle. Because it's kind of like Goldilocks and Three Bears, where you're just thinking to yourself, okay, am I falling behind of my peers and those around me? Am I not keeping up? How is that impacting my identity? Or the inverse, hey, I'm farther ahead. I'm getting ahead. I'm getting all these opportunities. How is that impacting your mental health, your sense of self, and are you attaching your self-worth to it? Or are you like right in the middle where you're not, better off, you're not worse off, you're kind of just coasting along and going through in the middle and hitting kind of similar goals to everyone else and to your parents or when they were your age. And as a whole, it's these three buckets that help us kind of determine why the quarter life crisis might hit. So if you're falling behind, then the quarter life crisis is how do I get ahead? If you're ahead already, then it's how do I stay ahead, or how do I determine what's going to be best to do going forward? And if you're kind of right in the middle, it's how do I maintain or make a decision to kind of boost things and elevate the direction I'm going in just a little bit more. And all that can happen very quickly within that small span of 10 years. And yes, I said small span for a reason. And the other part of that becomes growing, or where your parents were at this point in time. So in their 20s and 30s, where were they at? Of course, there's going to be the more obvious kind of difference here of they maybe and most likely had a house on a very much so smaller salary. But in the quarter life crisis, again, 20 to 30, then we're focusing on usually a sense of comparison. We're hitting that keeping up with the Joneses in a much more broadened view because of social media, because of our access to see what our friend from elementary school is suddenly up to, and the fact that they moved to San Francisco and they're a founder now, or one of them got their pilot's license and they're now flying helicopters and doing private tours, and you're sitting there in your 9-to-5 office job thinking, is this it? Is this all there is? Yes, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but the point still stands. We fall into the comparison trap so much with other people, and then also if you are still living with your parents or in this phase of extended adolescence, which I know I've talked about before, but is the general idea that the milestones that our parents hit when they were our age are getting pushed off longer and longer because of a variety of factors, whether that be cost of living, whether that be career prospects, and trying to catch up and make sure that we aren't falling behind or seeming like we're unable to do these things, then that's where the quarter life crisis can come in, because we wondered ourselves, again, is this all there is? Am I doing the right thing? How am I going to, I know the word itself kind of has some mixed reactions, but how am I going to properly adult and get to that level where I feel self-confident in myself and in who I am and in the identity that I'm building? But then it also brings us to the idea of, am I going to continue to do the same things? It's also the quarter life crisis because that first phase, that first identity crisis of self-discovery from like middle school to high school, now you're in this kind of confirmation phase. Are you confirming the identity? Are you continuing to do the same things that you used to do because, one, you got into those hobbies more and you got a better sense of who you are because you enjoyed those things? Are you trying to drift away from them, or have you drifted away from them because they no longer kind of meet the desires and the goals and the wants that you have in your life? And then we're all faced with that choice of, are we going to continue to do the same things? Are we going to continue to be the same person? And there's no easy answer here, but instead it's for myself especially, something that I realized was it's not so much continuing to do the same things, it's continuing to attempt to do the same things in different ways. And the best example of this is like this YouTube channel, this podcast, where I've been on YouTube for over a decade. And there's been different iterations that I've kept coming back to, but I've been doing this content creation for years. And yeah, there's been breaks and there's been seasons where I haven't posted anything, and then seasons where I posted every single day, and seasons like now where I'm consistent, but I am trying to build something and it's fun, it's exciting, but it isn't just the same thing from when I was in middle school starting this. It's now a new and improved version, and it's helping me understand more and more of who I am and who I want to be and where I want to go. And that's because of this first identity crisis leading into the quarter life crisis, where now I'm in my mid 20s. I am 25 years old, and then trying to think, where am I going to go in the next 5 years as I approach 30? And ultimately for you guys, that might be a similar vein or a similar direction that you fall into. But it's important just to know that in the 20s and 30s, this quarter life crisis is a time of confirming and reconfirming that first identity that you built and that first personality that was developed, and now seeing, are you happy with the direction you're going? Do you avidly want to change the direction you're going? Both answers are perfectly fine. It's just being honest with yourself about what is driving you from that point on. Real quick, if you are enjoying this episode, then you might also enjoy our weekly newsletter, the Keeping Everything Simple newsletter. Yes, there is a very obvious naming scheme going on here, but that's besides the point. If you want to get an inside look into how some of the lessons and stories I talk about play out in my life, then the weekly newsletter would be a great way to dive deeper into that, as well as getting resources and recommendations for books, articles, other YouTube videos that will give you greater insight into some of these complicated topics and how we're going to be able to boil them down more and more together. Subscribe down below in the link in description to the Keeping Everything Simple newsletter, and I will see you in your inbox. All right, let's get back to the podcast. But with that, with the first identity crisis and then the quarter life crisis, what can you do? What are simplified actions that you can take to start charting a new path forward? Now, the first thing is you want to level up your experiences, because life isn't meant to be lived passively, it's meant to be lived actively. So what I mean by this is the idea that you are the main character in the story. You yourself are the one who is both writing the story, you are directing the scenes that you go, and you are the one who, in the end, is going to have all the lessons and all the journeys along the way. So what this means is that you have to be actively involved. This means you can't just allow life to happen to you. You have to happen to your life. You have to choose a direction to go into. Maybe in this quarter life crisis, you've decided to avidly change and do something completely new. Maybe you start a new habit. Maybe you start a new routine. You build a new goal. You maybe start going to the gym, taking care of your health. Maybe you really dive into some niche hobby or niche interest and get really good about that. It might be things like really watching movies, becoming like a cinephile. Maybe you really want to get into creating, so maybe you start photography, or maybe you start writing. It's just so many different things that you are choosing to do because, again, you've decided to live your life and not just let your life be lived and you kind of just take a backseat to it and just kind of watch things pass by. And so that's the first simplified action, is decide to live actively, that you aren't a bystander, you're the main character. And then the next thing is that you want to grow your party, grow your skills, and then find connections or reignite them. Because what I mean by this is, when I'm talking about leveling up your life and your experiences, growing your party is having a good support network around you, a good amount of people who are there to push you forward, to encourage you, to make sure that if you're kind of drifting off to the side, they can help you kind of course correct, because they know the direction you want to go in. And if they see you kind of drifting away from that, they can help you say, hey, are you sure that's like the right way to go? That's the direction that you personally want to go in? And it's so important that we understand that we are the sum of the people we surround ourselves with, as well as the experiences we have. That's why the first part, or this first simplified action, was to live actively. Experiences are going to determine so much of your life going forward. and then to have a good circle of support around you, a good connection to a group of people, then that's going to help you summarize with a better understanding of who you are and who you want to be. And this might be finding new friends and new connections. Like if you had moved somewhere because of the identity crisis and you're like, okay, I need some new friends because I don't have anyone. Or it might be reigniting them and saying, hey, I want to get closer again to these people. Maybe they were friends from university that you kind of drifted a little bit away from, but you still keep in somewhat contact with, but you want to get into better contact with. Might be friends from like high school that you grew up with that know that first phase or that first identity crisis you had, and now might be able to help you in the second one, but you want to have this healthy and growing relationship with them. And so it's important that you grow the party, level up your experiences and the skills that you do have, and then choose a direction to aim towards and that you're going into, so that way you're not stagnating in a way that doesn't serve that greater purpose of, overcoming an identity crisis. If you're looking for an entry into journaling or just want to get more mindful about your own productivity, then go ahead and check out our daily review journal. This is the first edition of that journal. Available now on Amazon. Combining my own kind of journaling prompts throughout the day, it is an easy way to get you into journaling along with easy formatting to follow. So from daily gratitude to a daily review, along with goal setting using tomorrow's daily highlight, and ending with any notes and miscellaneous reminders that you might have for yourself. It is a fantastic way to, again, start the habit of journaling, as well as get more intentional about how you control your own view of life and your day-to-day. So this is just one step in that direction on how I can help you guys do that. But follow the link in the description down below to pick one up today. And with that, let's jump right back into the podcast. The final simplified action is to understand that we are all making it up a bit as we go. There is no one, and I say this with a fair amount of confidence, there is no one that truly has it 100% all figured out, no questions asked. They are set and on the right path. No. Instead, it's a matter of learn to plan, learn to adapt, improvise, and overcome. I know that was a Man vs. Wild thing where Bear Grylls was talking about that, but I'm adding the improvise step to there because so much of what we do is just kind of making up on the spot. We don't avidly know what one decision will lead to, what one outcome or what one project might bring to our lives. What is important here is that we understand that we can make a plan. We can have a 5-year, 10-year plan, and we can execute it. We can try to follow it to a T, but we have to adapt because something might go wrong. The only constant in life is that things will change. That you might have a plan and some circumstance that's completely out of your control might occur, and you have to work through it. You have to then improvise. You have to adapt and be able to say, okay, the plan I had isn't working anymore because of XYZ. I'm going to improvise and then overcome this hurdle and this trial and come out ahead because of it. So understand that even if someone, you're in your 20s, like you just turned 20, and you see someone at 27 and it looks like they're really on track, they might be. They might have a good sense of where they're going or the direction they're going in, but also understand that they are still making it up as they go as well. So be comfortable with that discomfort and understand that, again, everything can and will change. What's important is that you have a plan that you can improvise and adapt along the way so you can overcome whatever is thrown at you, because, again, something definitely will be. And of course, we all, in the end, struggle to really form our identity because the very thing that we call our personalities is challenged in your 20s, and it should be. It should be a source of questioning. It should be a source of, is this really the person I want to be? Confirming, again, the values that you have, the thoughts that you hold on to, and the stories that you tell yourself of, this is who I am, this is who I can be. And not only that, you're exposed to different points of view, and that expands your sense of understanding and the horizon that you can see. Because if you silo yourself into one area, into one town, and only ever see the same things over and over again, then you are going to be lacking and losing out on so many different experiences that it's going to put you in a worse spot in the end, because you haven't challenged your sense of self, that personality that was built previously, and really got to confirm it, rather than just saying, okay, this is what it is because I've been here my whole life. And in struggling and pushing forward, remembering to actively live, that this is your story. This is your ability to say, I want to be this type of person, or I am this type of person. And as you grow those connections, your party, and your skill sets, and have a variety of experiences, then make sure that you are truly embracing them and going deeper when necessary. Don't just have these surface level interests and surface level connections. Go deeper and allow yourself to really dig into the sum of the people that are around you. And of course, be ready to improvise whenever plans go awry, because something will go wrong. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Take that from me. So ultimately, just as you are going through this phase of discovery, this phase of confirmation, whichever one you're in, make sure that you are understanding who's around you, making sure you know where you've come from, and you also have an understanding or an idea of where you want to go. Because as we get bombarded with so many different points of views from both in person and online, it's just a matter of choosing a direction and not necessarily tuning everything out, but being set in this idea that if you take one step forward at a time, you eventually will make progress and find yourself in a much different spot than you were before, and a much different person than you were before. And I know you can do that. With that, don't forget to like and subscribe if you watch this on YouTube. Ring that notification bell so you know every time I upload a new episode. If you're listening to us on Spotify or another podcast app of choice, make sure you leave us a 5-star rating. That really helps out this show and shares it with other people just like you. And I truly do appreciate it so much. But with that, have an amazing day. You amazing people. I will see you all in the next episode. Go out there and do great things.